Okay, we'll get started in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting on a couple of other people to join us. So, yeah, I get a glass of water. Okay, so welcome to Human Resource Management, which is the Qualified Level 3 course for the Certificate in Business Management, and this is Lesson 2, where we're going to talk about motivation. Can you just send me a quick message and send me a private message if you can see and hear me? Okay, and we will get started. As usual, if you have a comment or a question, please don't hesitate to that's great, thank you, to put your hand up or to send me a private message. Anything at all that you're not sure about, because we'll be dealing with a little bit of theory in the middle of this session, so don't hesitate to pause it and get me to come back, because I suppose there's the overlap between this and business resources and recruitment and selection. You know, some of what we do will come up in the other modules, but it also means we can, if necessary, take a pause and deal with a question or an issue, that just to make sure that you understand what we're talking about. I like Dilbert, so the cartoon at the top there. I'm running low on motivation. What can you do for me? Follow your passion, and then of course he's stalking somebody. Stop following me. But hidden within that is the reality. I suppose there's a bit of truth in this, that, we talk about follow your passion as being a key element of motivation. We need to understand what motivation is, because it is actually quite crucial in every business, in every organization, but it's not just an organization responsibility. It also is an individual responsibility and an individual factor. So we need to sort of get into what it actually is and how it works. And it's quite a complex topic and concept. So I think I need to bring a bit of humor into it occasionally, but certainly it's part of the mix, let's put it that way. So what I've done is there's a couple of other elements to this that I've included. I'll introduce them, and because you can access this, I'd like you to spend a little bit of time on the Kellogg's case, if you like, certainly after the session, if we don't get through all of it today, and we'll take it from there. Okay. So what we're focused on today is the second learning objective, understanding how an organization motivates its employees. So we want to identify ways that an organization can motivate its employees. And that's why the Kellogg's case is really important, because it shows how Kellogg's, which is a big multinational food company, approaches motivation of its employees. Okay? Before we get to that, we have to deal with a number of elements of theory and so on. The outcomes that, as learners, you should be in a position after this to be able to do is that, you should be able to deal with a scenario where the MD or your boss has recognized that motivating and managing a larger workforce requires the use of a range of motivational performance management techniques. So your boss or their boss has recognized that motivation is crucial. Of course, motivation is tied in with performance management. It's not all about performance management, and performance management isn't all about motivation, but it is linked to that. So the task is you're to produce a presentation or report on how the organization can motivate its employees, obtain their cooperation, and manage their performance. Ideally, you should analyze the links between motivation theories and reward systems that the organization uses. So what are the links between the motivation theories and how we go about rewarding people? And we need to make recommendations then as to how they can improve performance by the use of measurement and management techniques. So yeah, ideally, that's what you should be able to deal with, by the end of this module. Some of it within this today's session alone. So learning out under the title there, learning outcome number 2, of course, is that tutors should aim for learners to begin understanding the main motivational methods. We're going to talk about motivation. If you're using a case study, which you've got the Kellogg's case study, you should discuss the effectiveness of different motivational methods. And so Kellogg's have gone through a couple of examples. And then, we can talk about incentives and so on. But the first thing is, what is motivation? What is it? So in a class, particularly in a group setting, I'll often sort of put this picture up and I'll say, let's go back at 3,000 or 4,000 years. Let's assume we're back in ancient Egypt and I'm the pharaoh and I say I want a pyramid. What happens? Well, because I'm a pharaoh or emperor equivalent, I'm going to get my pyramid. But back then we don't have bulldozers or cranes and everything else. It's all going to be built by hand. So I'm going to have my 20,000 slaves or whatever build this pyramid. And of course, we shouldn't have slavery anymore. So the techniques that are partially used in building the pyramid, some of which are relevant, but some not obviously, but some of those core elements are linked with motivation, but they're linked with very basic elements of motivation. So I'm going to force people as a pharaoh, and because I have an army, I'm going to be able to force people to do what I want. I'm going to be able to get this pyramid built. It might take decades and decades, but it's going to be built eventually. So we need to answer that question, what is motivation? So some of the ideas around it are that it's a theoretical construct used to explain behavior. Theoretical construct used to explain behavior. So that's a nice, easy way out. In some ways, it's a theoretical construct, and we use that to explain behavior. But there is something in it at the end of the day around explaining behavior. So what we're looking to do in any organization is we're looking to achieve a certain behavior. How we get that behavior is influenced by how we approach motivation. So we can kind of reverse that idea and say, okay, if it's a theoretical construct, well, what's the construct and how are we going to use it? Because we're looking for people to do their best. We're looking for people to generate ideas. We're looking for our people to work together well. So when we bring it more into an organizational focus, then we can talk about motivation as being a reason or reasons for acting or behaving in a particular way. Okay, now that's a bit more useful. It gives us something to work with. We're looking for a certain behavior. We're looking for people to behave in a certain way. So now, as opposed to theoretical construct, what are the reasons that will get people to do this? What reasons, and if we know the reasons, then how do we put them in place, or how do we enable the reason or the purpose that gets people to behave in a certain way? So motivation has also been defined as an internal process that makes a person move towards a goal. Motivation, like intelligence, can't be directly observed. Instead, motivation can only be inferred by noting a person's behavior. That's a little bit less useless to us because, okay, absolutely, I certainly agree with this. I certainly agree with this idea here. Let me choose the highlighter instead. Let me choose this. I certainly agree with this idea. Motivation can't be directly observed. So we can't handle it. We can't pick it up. Okay? So it can be inferred by noting a person's behavior. Okay, well, that's useful too. But we can't directly observe it, and it's not tangible. So we do understand that it helps somebody do what we want them to do. So, okay, it's like intelligence, we can't be inferred. The next definition, internal and external factors. Motivation is internal and external factors that stimulate desire, energy in people to be continually interested and committed to a job, a role, or a subject, or to make an effort to obtain a goal. Yeah, that's useful enough. I mean, it's long-winded, it's difficult to understand in some ways. Internal and external factors. Now, that is important because that means that for the first time we can say, okay, it's, if it's internal and external, it's that idea of shared responsibility. It's not just the organization. It may also be the individual. So those factors that stimulate desire and energy in people, get them continually interested and committed, and to make an effort to attain goals. So now we can link it to something that we want to get done. So the problem with this is there's no one definition. There's no one way to say motivation is. We can talk about finance, we can talk about change, we can talk about structure, we can talk about organization, similar issues to a certain extent. Motivation is one of those pieces where there's actually quite little consensus from my point of view. I think there's rather little consensus. So therefore, we are dealing in the dark to a certain extent. I do like this. Motivation is the set of forces that cause people to behave in certain ways. And I think if we link this with the fact that it's internal and external factors, it's not just me, it's actually both of us. Then we can look at the set of forces that cause people to behave in certain ways. Ideally, we want to do it in a positive way as opposed to a negative or a coercive approach. But it's trying to understand what grouping of forces will get my people to do what I want them to do. Ideally, I want them to want to do it. That's part of the motivation factor. So motivation is difficult, right? Fundamentally, it's difficult, very hard to define. So we're going to look, first of all, at a few of the theories of motivation to see how thinking about motivation has developed over time. And then we'll look at a couple of examples as to how it can be effective. The first thing as we go into this is recognizing that we're dealing with something that is part of our HR system, okay? And we will come back and talk about performance appraisal, which is around providing information on how to train, motivate, and reward workers. And it's linked to pay and benefits, how we, that element of rewarding workers. So it is directly linked into this part of the HR system, and we will be revisiting. Well, let's start off with Pavlov's dogs. So, because of this difficulty around how we define motivation, this theoretical construct or this set of forces, and we come at it from the point of view that we want a certain behavior, we've been looking at motivation for quite a while. So Pavlov's dog experiments is one element of it. I'm taking Pavlov's dogs as part. He did think of deer and other bits and pieces. And we won't go into the actual experiments themselves. But the whole idea was that Pavlov was exploring classical conditioning. And classical conditioning occurs when a conditioned stimulus is paired with an unconditioned stimulus. So what does that mean? Well, the stimulus is something that causes an effect. So if I stick a pin in you, you're going to jump. You may shout, cry, hit me. That's beside the point. The stimulus is I've stuck a pin in you. Right? If somebody offers me €1,000 to do something, that's a motivating factor. It's like they're stimulating me. They're introducing something into the equation to get me to do something. So classical conditioning is concerned with a conditioned stimulus, a structured conditioned stimulus. And it's pairing it with an unconditioned stimulus, an automatic reaction. And what Pavlov wanted to do was he was looking at, well, what causes dogs to behave in certain ways? And one of the elements, which I always choose because it's the easiest in one sense to talk about, is he was measuring the changes that happened with dogs, when food was introduced into the equation. So dogs will salivate when they're getting ready to eat it. They're going to eat food, it's going to help break down the food, etc. And, they'll start to, you'll see dogs licking their lips, all this sort of stuff, getting ready for the food. They know the food's coming, they're going to eat it. Okay? So he noticed this reaction, this biological reaction, this biological response to food being introduced. And in many ways, it was a type of behavior. So what he wanted to do was then say, well, okay, well, what about if we, and that was he observed that the salivation of the dogs was an unconditioned stimulus. So he wanted to introduce a conditioned stimulus and see if he could achieve something. So what he started to do was, when he was feeding the dogs, he introduced a conditioned stimulus, in the case of a noise, for example, a whistle or some other regular noise. So when the food was introduced, the noise could be heard. So the dog is hearing the noise and seeing the food. Now, normally the dog sees the food, it starts to salivate. And so over actually a relatively short time of doing this, repeating this exercise time and time again, the food being put into the bowl and being given to the dog and the noise going off. So the food going into the bowl, the dog starting to salivate. Again, noise, food going into the bowl, giving the bowl to the dog is starting to salivate. And after a number of iterations of this, what he did was he introduced the noise without the food. The dog, hearing the noise, started to salivate. So this was now classical conditioning. Pavlov had conditioned the dog to start salivating based on the noise. Why? Because the dog had associated the noise with the food. So previously, the dog sees the food and starts to salivate. Now it's associated noise, whistle with food is coming, start to salivate. So now it gets to a stage where the stimulus comes in, the noise, food must be coming, I'm going to start salivating. So the noise triggers the salivating. Classical conditioning. Now, why is that important? Because it's that idea that, you know what, if we can condition people, we can get them to behave in certain ways. So he trained this dog to behave in a certain way, a predictable response. Interesting, a predictable response. So that's one of the key things, predictable response. That's one of the important elements that we're looking for. If we can cause a predictable response every time, then maybe we figured it out or we've cracked part of motivation. We figured out the set of forces. We do this, we get that result. Of course, there's a difference between dogs and humans. In addition, the dog isn't going to salivate forever if there's no food back in the equation. Pretty soon, the dog will realize that the noise doesn't bring food, and perhaps the response, the predictable response, will start to erode. So, but that's a separate problem. But the first thing is, classical conditioning, we can look at introducing a conditioned stimulus, pairing it with an unconditioned stimulus, so we get to a desired outcome. Okay, again, it's a science experiment. But that led on to Skinner's rats, which is operant conditioning. And this is the next level, if you like. And what Skinner, B.F. Skinner, was doing was looking at motivation. And Skinner died about 30 years ago. he was looking at a different type of conditioning, which was operant conditioning, also called instrumental conditioning. And it was a way of establishing or creating a learning process through which the strength of a behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. So it's not just classical conditioning stimulus. This was learning based on, the classical condition was learning based on that association of the stimulus. Here, learning is enabled by, and behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. Okay? So therefore, operant conditioning is a process or a procedure that can be used to bring about learning. And what Skinner did was he worked with rats in a little maze, and he created this thing whereby, so rats were fed a bit of cheese, they ate the cheese, and over time, he trained the rats that if they pressed this lever, they would get cheese. So the rats started to learn that with this behavior, they got cheese. If they went over and they pressed this lever, they got a piece of cheese. If they pressed the lever, they got a piece of cheese. So that, excuse me, that operant conditioning means that we've moved on now from just a stimulus to a behavior modification. Modify the behavior. Now, excuse me, now we've got something that's quite useful from a motivation point of view. Because if we can change behavior and we know the behavior we want, okay, well, if we can change behavior to that, then that's a powerful tool in our organizational development framework. Excuse me, I've been coughing for the last few days. The problem with, of course, these two stories, these two developments, is we're dealing with jogs and then rats. But when we step forward and we talk about Elton Mayo and the Hawthorne studies, we start to change the dynamic. So Mayo was an Australian. And he was working, went to Harvard then, he was studying at Harvard and he was doing research in Harvard. And he got involved in the Hawthorne studies, which was a sort of an industrial research piece based on the work of Frederick Taylor, who was in many ways the father of scientific management. Frederick Taylor was a mechanical engineer, and he was very much interested in how do we do things better, how do we do things more efficiently. So that whole job design we talked about in the last hour, that idea of job rotation, looking at the work, defining the work, specializing, very much a Taylor thing. And that Taylor's whole idea was that, if we pay people, they'll do the work. If we look at the work and we're scientifically and analyze it, and we figure out how efficiently to do it, and we pay people, we train people, and we pay them to do it in a new way, we can get much more productivity out of them. And that worked straight away for Taylor. It helped to shape things. But it was very much a mechanical engineer's point of view. It was not considering humans. So Elton Mayo is part of a panel who were doing research in Chicago, near Chicago, a town called Hawthorne, in a factory like this here. And they're looking at they're learning from Taylor's methods. And they're looking to see, well, okay, how can we achieve the next great leap in performance? How can we find more productivity? They're not looking for humans or human reactions. But what Mayo discovered is that, by accident is too strong, but they ran a series of experiments. The most often quoted one is the one that illustrated most. But it wasn't the only one. There was a number of different experiments. They were running experiments to see, well, if we change the conditions, do we get more productivity? So they had workers doing particular function, and they in two different areas, and they said, okay, everything else is the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to observe both of these groups, your traditional control group and your change group, and we're going to change the conditions for one of them and see if it improves or disproves productivity. So they are observing both of them. And with this group over here, they change the lighting. they reduced the lighting and they increased the lighting. So they went through changes. And so what they were expecting to find, what Mayo was expecting to find, was that actually when they increased the lighting, productivity would go up. When they reduced the lighting, productivity would go down. And over here, it would be the same. It would stay the same. But what they noticed was when they increased the lighting in this group over here, productivity went up, and so did the group over here. So now they had a problem. Why was productivity rising over here where there'd been no change? We made a change over here, and we expected productivity to rise, and we saw it happen. We saw no change. We made no changes here, and yet productivity also rose. So what they realized as a result of this and a number of other examples here in the Hawthorne studies was that, you know what? There has to be something else that's causing this change in productivity. What could it be? So what Mayo and his team sort of realized, well, the very fact that they were observing the workers in both areas meant that both areas were being interfered with. And the very fact of being observed was having an impact on the workers in the control group, just as it was in the other group, as was the lighting aspect. Therefore, there had to be something in that, the fact that they were being observed. What was it? So, long story short, what Mayo sort of decided then that workers were best motivated by, but basically it was the actual fact that they were being observed. The engagement was what was giving rise to the productivity. So Mayo postulated then that workers were best motivated by better communication by management of workers, by simple engagement. By the very fact that they were being observed, their productivity was going up. So that sort of communication and engagement was important. The second thing that came out of these studies was that if they increased their awareness and their concern for workers, in other words, they showed greater attention and concern for what was going on in their lives outside of the work, again, that contributed to performance boost improvement. And working in groups or teams and not in isolation. So an extension of this observation element meant that productivity would go up. So all of these, of course, are very human factors, very much human behavioral factors. So better communication, more awareness and involvement, and working in groups and teams all led to increased productivity. Couldn't be explained by the industrial designer's approach in terms of saying, well, instead of taking this product from here and walking it over here and putting it here, if we had a simple conveyor belt, or if we lifted it straight up and put it here, move the thing. Not a mechanical thing. The very fact of human engagement, communication, observation, concern for workers, working with others, helped boost productivity. So therefore, this led to the founding, if you like, of the behavioral school of HR, human resource management. So this was the big light bulb moment. You know what? It's about people. It's about how people work together, how they engage and learn. So that was Mayo's big contribution. Of course, the Hawthorne study took place over several years, but it was that idea that suddenly there's more to it than just operant conditioning, classical conditioning, more to it than just pay for skills or pay for time, more to it than that sort of taking the human out of the equation. And that's where things really start then to take off in terms of motivation. So one of the really big theories is from a guy called Abraham Maslow. We refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so, partly building on the...
I can't search what something is.
Partly building on Elton's stuff, Mayo, who was a psychologist, postulated was that, you know what? People have lots of different needs. So, but there's a hierarchy of these needs. And if we understand this, we can then look at how they get motivated, or how we motivate them to achieve what we want to achieve. So Maslow's hierarchy starts out very simply with the lower level. It's physiological. The need to breathe, to eat, to drink. The need for sex, for sleep, right? For excretion, the very basic biological factors, human factors that drive us all, right? You can't not breathe, okay? If you don't breathe, that's your history. So you need fresh air to breathe. You need oxygen. You need water, you need food and water, or you're going to fall over. So these basic physiological needs. So one of the first reasons that people will work on is to feed those things, is to solve those needs. And once you solve those needs, then the next level of needs comes into play. Security of body, employment, resources, morality, security of the family, the health of property. So once we've got our basic bread on the table, we've covered the basic physiological stuff, people then start to focus on, well, okay, protection, safety, warmth, shelter, family, looking after our own. So we start to look at the safety factors. So therefore we get a wage and we can eat, we can drink, we can put a roof over our heads, we can, send kids to school. So now we've dealt with a couple of these basic ingredients. We now move on to the next level, love and belonging. You know what? Once we've got those two levels satisfied, we'd look for things like friendship and engagement, to belong, both at home, with our families, in teams, in workplaces, so that we're part of something. We have human interaction. That very thing about being observed in the Hawthorne studies. Okay, we're belonging to a team. And once we have that sort of engagement, friendship and love and belongingness, we start then to think about esteem. Our own self-esteem, our confidence, our achievement. We want respect from others, our respect of others. So that we're into that, I've made a difference piece. Okay? And again, so, if the first three levels are being satisfied, we're more focused on the fourth level. If we're resolving that and we feel confident, we feel like we've achieved things, we feel we've got some element of respect and we pay respect out to others, we may then start focusing on things like what Maslow calls self-actualization. So that higher order of motivating factors, morality, creativity. I want to write a book. I feel it in me that this is something I want to do and I'd like to achieve. And I want to solve problems, I want to bring about world peace, whatever. Okay? That sort of self-actualization, self-realization. So what Maslow has done is he's created this hierarchy of things that drive individuals. If you sort out the bottom one and the next one, you can focus on the third. You sort that out, you focus on the fourth, and so on. So Maslow's great contribution was this idea that, there's many different things that motivate us, but they are tiered. They are at different levels, and we need to sort of bear that in mind and to work with that. That's all well and good, having some sort of hierarchy of needs, but what use is it to us? Well, that's where we start to apply it in the workplace. When we talk about Maslow's hierarchy, if we have this physiological security, belongingness, esteem, and self-actualization, these tiers of things that we need, well, what can the organization do? What can the employer do to feed those things, to get people to do more, to get them to contribute? What can we do to ensure the behavior we want to achieve? Well, we deal with the physiological and the security issues with basic things like salary and pensions. People come to work, we pay them fairly. They get to deal with those first two elements, physiological and secure elements. They get to have food on the table. They get to have stable, safe, secure environments. Okay, that's great. So how do we get more out of them? Well, we encourage engagement at work. We encourage belongingness. We encourage friendships, and we have time for team events or team days. We celebrate birthdays. We recognize each other. We go a little bit further for our employees and our colleagues, and we get that belongingness. And then we look at esteem. Well, maybe it's to do with job title and recognition. Look, we recognize you're doing a really good job here. It's not just about giving you a bonus. It's about saying, look, well done. And we want to put you in charge of this because we think you're really good at it and we think you can make a difference. Okay? And that leads into self-actualization. It's about having a challenging job and about that mission focus. So here's how we're going to change the world. And this is the famous thing that Steve Jobs did with John Sculley when he was running Apple the first time around. There was a recognition they needed a professional chief executive to help run the business. And one of the things that Jobs went to try and hire somebody, because he founded Apple with Steve Wozniak, they needed a professional manager or somebody experienced. And they found a guy who was running Pepsi Cola at the time, John Sculley, and he went to Sculley and they tried to recruit him. And Sculley said, look, I don't know anything about computers. I'm a marketing guy. I'm building a Pepsi. I'm doing this. Really, I'd love to help you out, but I know nothing about computers. And so he was going to say no, and Jobs wouldn't take no for an answer. And Jobs went back to him and said to him, do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come at me and change the world? Because that's how powerful Jobs' vision was. He wanted the computer on every desk. He wanted to change the way people did things. To change, he saw the possibility of the connected world, etc. And of course, this really gave John Sculley the impetus to come and join Apple. So it's that idea of a challenge job and self-actualization. So by being aware of and understanding at what level somebody might be at in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, we can put together a package or an involvement to encourage them, to get them to change their behavior, to get them to do what we want them to do, to join us in what we're trying to achieve. And it's that approach to motivation effect that gives us the ability to engage with individuals and to achieve more out of organizations. So motivation can be really, really powerful if we understand the individual and what their needs and wants are. I mean, that quote on the slide is from Maslow as well. And it sort of goes to the fact that, if we don't have that sort of knowledge and understanding, that sort of human, that Mayo talked about, that awareness of what's going on with our people. If the only tool we have is a hammer, we tend to see every problem as a nail. If we understand more about our people, we have more options in how we reward them and engage them, and therefore how we can manage motivation with them and with others in the business and achieve more. That's what Maslow's contribution was. It's this recognition that there's lots of different things. Everybody's different. We need to understand the differences and the individuals, and then we can work out how we deal with and how we best help them achieve what they want to achieve and help us achieve what we want to achieve. And that sort of fed on then to other motivation theories. So I'm not going to go into all of them, just a couple more. David McClellan talked about the learned needs theory. And his idea was that, similar to Maslow, is that, actually there's sort of three broad types of motivator in the individual: the need for power, the need for affiliation, and the need for achievement. So some people want power. It's a dominant motivator for them. They want to be able to control and influence others. They like to win arguments. They enjoy competition and winning, and they enjoy status. So, their dominant motivator is power. Where somebody else might have a motivator for achievement. They have a strong need to set out and accomplish challenging goals. They want to take calculated risks to accomplish their goals. They like to work alone. They like to receive regular feedback on their progress and achievements. They like others to know that they've achieved something. And then again, for somebody else, it might be need for affiliation. They want to belong to a group. They want to be liked. They don't like high risk or uncertainty. They favor collaboration. So as an individual, you may score high or low on any one of these or more than one of these. But by understanding what the dominant motivator of our people, our employee or team member is, if we can identify that, then we can use that information when we set goals and provide feedback to them to enable them to focus them on the work we want them to achieve. If their need is for power, well, then we can talk about, they enjoy competition and winning. Well, we're framing this challenge as a competition, as a chance for us to achieve something. And with that, there'll be status and recognition. Okay? So we frame our challenge, our motivating factors in to fit their dominant motivator. But we have to understand our people. So it's back to that Mayo thing. We can't just do this. You have to understand your person and figure out what's the right mix. Hertzberg is the other important theorist in this. Hertzberg approaches slightly differently, and that he said, you know what? Actually, there's two levels here. It's not just this need or that need. You know, there can be simultaneous needs. And he broke them down into hygiene factors and motivating factors. And the basic idea was that, you know, hygiene factors are dissatisfiers, or have the potential to be dissatisfiers, whereas motivation factors have the potential to be satisfiers. So there's a distinction between no dissatisfaction and no satisfaction. You can have both at the same time. So our hygiene factors are, if you like, the threshold stuff. You know, supervision, working conditions, pay and security. Again, going at the lower levels from Maslow's point of view. Company-wide policies, administration. So they can be factors which can scare people away or which can demotivate people if they're not handled correctly. Ideally, there should be stuff that's threshold. We should get that stuff right. And then we can focus on the motivating factors. The stuff like for achievement or recognition, the responsibility growth, and so on. So we have the opportunity, if we manage those factors well, to really build in opportunities for satisfaction with the individual. And it's best shown by this little chart down here. If we're low on hygiene factors and we're low on motivation factors, we're not scoring well on them, the employee is experiencing misery. Right? That's the reality. If we're low on hygiene, low on these factors here, but high on motivation in terms of achievement and recognition and so on, the employee might find the job very hard but meaningful. If we're low on motivation and high on hygiene, so we've got the basics right, it's a comfortable but unfulfilling job. Whereas if we're high on both of them, it's a fun and exciting job, and I don't need to worry about the hygiene factors because all that stuff is taken care of. So we want our people to be up here. We want our organizations to facilitate stuff up here by getting the hygiene factors sorted and then creating the motivating factors. And that's what Hertzberg's contributions were. So we've come a long way from the initial stuff of classical and operant conditioning, and we've sort of got beyond Taylor's focus, which was very mechanical and ignoring the person. We're now recognizing a whole number of things about individuals, about, you know, what their needs are and what their levels of needs are and what's important to them. And we only get that by engaging with them. But once we have that, we're in a better position then to structure our relationship, their work, you know, how the organization is structured, who does what, how we group jobs together, bearing in mind what we want to achieve, but also bearing in mind our people and how we actually move things forward. And if we understand all that, we have a much better chance of getting a highly motivated workforce. And that sort of leads on to expectancy theory, because if we can do that, if we're sort of buying into Hertzberg and Maslow and so on, the cloud, you know, we can look at something like expectancy theory, where we're saying, okay, you know what? Our people are smart enough, okay? So they know they have outcomes they want to achieve and we want to achieve. And those outcomes will come about if we get the right performance. And we'll get the right performance if we, as the business, so the business is responsible for providing the right environment within which to work, so dealing with the hygiene factors, provide the equipment and the machinery and the backup that's required, okay? By recruiting people with the right ability, are providing the learning opportunities and training to train our people to give them the right abilities. And then finding out what motivates them. What's the factor that gets them up in the morning, that brings them to work to do stuff they're interested in doing, so that we get their effort. So our performance is a function of the environment. We're entirely responsible for that. Their ability, we're responsible for that in terms of how we hire them and the learning opportunities we give, and their effort in terms of what they're willing to bring into the equation. If they're willing to give 100%, great. If they're not willing to go 100%, why not? What's the motivation factor that will get them to provide the effort that's required to deliver the performance that's required to deliver the outcomes that's required? Okay? That's how this model works. And it's based on building up our understanding of motivation. So for motivated behavior to occur, we want to get the effort to performance expectancy must be positive. We've got to get this piece right. Get the right effort level. Okay? We've got to get the performance to outcome expectancy must also be greater than 0. So we've got to be clear that if they do this performance, we're going to get the outcomes. And finally, that the valence, which is the relative importance of those outcomes, is high enough that these guys want to perform. That's the motivating factor, linking back into here, that gets them to provide the effort to move the thing across the line. Okay? And that ties in with what we talk about now from a goal-setting point of view. So all of this leads up to how do we set our goals for our individuals? Well, remember, we're looking for this performance. Okay? If we get the right performance, there'll be intrinsic rewards, there'll be extrinsic rewards, and we and the organization will be satisfied with what we've achieved. So the performance we're looking for has to be a function of this organization support, this environment, as I said, has to be a function of their individual abilities and traits and the training we provide. And the goal-directed effort has to be a function of an acceptance of the goal to be achieved and a commitment to doing what needs to be done to deliver the goal-directed effort, which is a function of how difficult is the goal and how clear are we on what the goal specificity is. So in reality, the bits that we can influence are the yellow boxes. As management, we can influence the yellow boxes to get the green boxes to where we want them to be so that the purple boxes are achieved. Okay? So that's, if you like, our introduction to motivation, going through a number of theories and setting it all up. What I want to do now is, there's a Kellogg's case study which I want you to have a look at, and then we'll talk about, there's some slides on that. In addition, I put a video up here let me see if we can play it now and see if it works. Just send me a message if it doesn't work for you. It's only a short 2-minute video. It's from the Harvard Business Review.
It's an eternal management question. How do you motivate an employee to do something? For starters, how about a good kick in the pants? In a classic article, Frederick Herzberg actually gives the kick in the pants option careful consideration. While it may be popular, he argues, it is at best an inelegant and cruel short-term solution that a manager does to the employee. A manager's goal should be to get employees to move forward on their own without being pushed. To do this, Herzberg makes a crucial distinction about job satisfaction. It is not the opposite of job dissatisfaction. In fact, there are completely distinct factors that affect happiness versus unhappiness on the job. Herzberg calls the causes of job dissatisfaction hygiene factors, basic external needs like a decent salary, safe working conditions, and job security. It's easy to see how an employee could be disgruntled without such basics. However, while it is important to address these hygiene factors to eliminate dissatisfaction, they do little to actually motivate a person to higher performance. Herzberg argues that a second simultaneous approach is needed. Management should also focus on an entirely different set of internal factors to boost job satisfaction, such as challenging work, autonomy, recognition, and advancement. These factors engage employees so that they become self-motivated to perform well time and again. So once again, motivating employees requires a two-pronged approach. Managers should first ensure that employees are happy with the basic external needs of salary and work environment. At the same time, they also need to make sure that people's jobs are personally satisfying and that good work is recognized. And the kick in the pants option, best to avoid that one, unless you're hoping to motivate your employee to kick you back in return.
Okay, did that work okay for you? First of all, did you see and hear that? You can just drop me a quick message. Once or somebody can. Did the video work? Okay, so the case here. Okay, so the case I want you to look at is Kellogg's. So Kellogg's, as you know, is a world-leading provider of breakfast cereals, Kellogg's cornflakes and Special K, etc., etc. Okay, and what this case study does is it runs through some of the theories we've talked about. Okay, it talks about so it introduced the company first of all. Okay, and then it talks about F.W. Taylor, as I said. It talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It talks about Elton Mayo and Hertzberg, and it comes up with a number of, it basically introduces the theories to a certain extent. And what it does is it introduces some examples from Kellogg's as it's going, as you go through the case. So, for example, after explaining about Maslow's piece here, it talks about Laura O'Brien joins Kellogg's. Joined the Kellogg's field sales team straight after leaving university in 2002. After 2 years, she was promoted to customer marketing manager at head office. In 2009, she was promoted again to manage the marketing plan for Special K. She's now a brand manager. So that's, if you like, a way that her esteem and self-actualization have actually been addressed. It talks about Elton Mayo in terms of, in terms of the factors we talked about. And Kellogg's, how Kellogg's has tried to respond or try to incorporate those ideas in its business. So Kellogg's promotes a number of motivating factors. For instance, it has its Fit for Life program, giving staff access to fitness centers, free health checks and yearly fitness assessments. It provides flexible home working and part-time working, job sharing, and career breaks for time off care for children and so on, and on-site gyms. So, what they're trying to address, they're the Hertzberg hygiene and motivating factors, trying to address different elements in some of these theories. So Kellogg shows that having highly motivated staff can improve efficiency, output, and quality. And motivating staff helps to make them more committed in the workplace. So it's a very short, simple case study, right? And if we just look at some of the outcomes from that, then how does Kellogg's build a better workplace through motivation? Well, there's just the stuff on Kellogg's. It's the world-leading producer of breakfast cereals, 18 countries, sales in 188, producing in 18 sales in 180 countries, been around for over 100 years. And it keeps its people motivated by having a culture of ownership. It's our business. Drives continuous improvement by focusing on improvements all the time and getting people involved in that process. Increases loyalty and reduces absenteeism, and supports its K values. So in the case, just going back here on this page, here, Kellogg's encourages its staff to live by its K values. These values influence workers, making Kellogg's a positive place to work. Kellogg's wants to build a great place to work. So it's continuing to work on this. Okay. So there's the K values, and it offers financial and non-financial motivating factors, such as the gyms and the flexi work from home and so on. It outlines the case study slides, just outline a couple of the brief theories. So the scientific management, which is Taylor's thing about breaking jobs down, and the monetary reward being a primary focus there. And it has limited relevance to Kellogg's, is what this is saying. Focus on output only increases productivity, but may affect quality levels. So just producing more doesn't necessarily cut it in terms of the quality of the output. But then he talks about Abraham Maslow, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Kellogg's provides motivating at every level, strong communication to supporting a sense of well-being, of belonging, and then motivating factors such as, offers competitive pay and secure working conditions to solve the basic and safety needs, and then non-financial things that Kellogg's does, recognizes achievements and offers challenging opportunities to try and address those esteem and also self-actualization needs. And looking at building on Mayo's work, Kellogg's has improved its approach by focusing on team working, focusing on the manager's level of interest, encouraging managers to have that interest in their people, to know when the people are having a tough time or when something good's happened at home, or to get them to share more and to engage more, and by establishing opportunity for clear communication and consultation. In addition, there's this opportunity of working together in teams is very, very important as well. So Kellogg's programs include things like its Values Awards, which recognize performance internally in the business. It has a suggestion box scheme, which generates improvement ideas for the business and gives people an outlet for contributing to the future direction, for identifying things that might be worthwhile doing. And of course, its program provides for personal development planning, reinforces the individual's commitment to its sense of well-being, and creating opportunities for professional development. So Kellogg's tries to do all of these things, implying Hertzberg's theory, the satisfiers and dissatisfiers. Kellogg's includes things like the Fit for Life program, the flexible working, and to get some of those hygiene factors out of the way. We wanted it to be a nice place to work, we want people to be fit and everything else, and then creating sharing and rewarding success demonstration opportunities to recognizing the K values. So those sort of satisfiers are addressed as well. So it's a very simple case study, but it illustrates some of what we talked about in the module. So let me just go back to slide 1. And I suppose on the basis of that, you should have some ideas of the ways that organizations can motivate employees. And if you look at some of the organizations you've experience of, you can see, well, where are they dealing with? Are they dealing with the lower levels only, the pay and security stuff? Or are they actually looking for more out of their employees and their partners? So it's an interesting way of looking at this. Now you should have some idea of the basic theories. What does your organization or that organization or this organization do to try and manage motivation with its employees? If you think, and it's to get to what do they do to bring a set of forces together that cause people to behave in certain ways. So how do they focus on that sort of achievement to get achievement that the organization wants? All right. Well, that's it for today. Any questions? Did that video work for you? If no questions, then I will see you next week for business resources and recruitment selection, and then for business environment and introduction to HRL. All right. Thank you very much.